Good day, Trinidad and Tobago, and welcome to Talk City 91.1 FM. We are going to be having a very special discussion here on Talk City over the next hour or so. We're putting the spotlight on World Environment Day, which is Sunday, June the 5th this year, 2011. And the theme for World Environment Day is Forests, Nature at Your Service. And it's very interesting that that's the theme for this year's World Environment Day, because this is also the International Year of Forests. Well, to help us speak to those and other related themes, we have three very fine gentlemen, all unashamed tree huggers and lovers of nature and the environment. A special good morning to Mr. Kenny SINGH. He is the Deputy Conservator of Forests. We want to say good morning to Stephen Greenleaf. He is an environmental lobbyist and expert and has his own company, which is working to find a way to have a sustainable economic development while balancing environmental considerations. We also want to say good morning to Kyle LIMA of Trini Eco Warriors, an unashamed tree hugger who wants us to find a balance between loving nature, recreating in nature, but protecting nature at the same time. So, gents, thank you for joining us on Talk City 91.1 FM. Let's start with Mr. SINGH and the fact that this year's World Environment Day dovetails very nicely, the theme of it dovetails very nicely with the fact that this is the International Year of Forests. I mean, that must be very significant for foresters and those in that line of activity.
It is. It is a decision that came out of the UN General Assembly to highlight the importance of forests to our well-being, our survival. By our survival, I mean all of humankind. We depend on forests. If we examine all the various goods and services that come out of the forest, you'd see that they are very essential for our well-being. And therefore, the UN General Assembly accepted the proposition that we should spend the entire year 2011 highlighting the importance of forests and also what we, as beneficiaries of the goods and services of the forest, can do to ensure that the forests are protected and survive for generations to come.
We tend to take our forests for granted, don't we? I mean, at one point in our existence, you could say that having the forest was really important for our economic development, even our survival. And for in many parts of the world, that's still the reality for many of us. Even here in Trinidad and Tobago, people still see the forest as something that you go in, you exploit, you take from, but they don't see the importance of making sure that those forests are sustained and maintained. Stephen Greenleaf.
Whether someone ever sets foot in a forest, they benefit from having those forests as part of their nation. Forests, you might live in central Trinidad somewhere and not anywhere near a forest. You might not go in the forest. You might not even like going in the bush. But forests are providing you all sorts of services that actually have a great deal of economic value. They are providing you with air to breathe. They're providing you with clean drinking water into the WASA system. They're probably protecting you against flooding. And also, tropical rainforests are full of species that are constantly being found to be utilitarian in a lot of ways. And so someday, one of those little plants up in that forest that you don't really care about too much may produce a chemical that saves your child's life. We saw this in California for years. There was a little tree called a Pacific yew. Very ordinary, nothing fancy tree. And in forestry, we would cut them down and get them out of the way for what were supposedly valuable trees until someone discovered a chemical in the bark of those trees called Taxol that ended up spawning a whole new family of very valuable cancer drugs. So you never know where salvation's going to come from. So that's what I try to emphasize, is that, you don't have to be a tree hugger to benefit from the forest and to have forests be a valuable part of your daily life.
Kyle LIMA, you're the youngest of the three assembled here this morning, and you probably would have grown up hearing about let's save the planet, let's preserve the earth, let's protect our forests and our seas and so on and so forth. Do you think, though, that many of the people in our generation really got that message? Are there enough young people who understand the importance of preserving this legacy, that we are custodians of our forests?
That's a difficult question. I think that many people have received the message. Whether or not they choose to act on it is a different story. Some people find it easy once it's out of sight, it's out of mind. It's easy for them not to pay attention to the little things they do on a day-to-day basis that affect the larger picture. So, for example, little things like setting a small fire to clear a brush space behind your yard, which turns into a larger fire, destroys a section of forest. The person who is responsible for that may not think that there's anything significant that has happened because of that, but that act of irresponsibility has then probably led to the exposure to, like Stephen said earlier, you could then now cause flooding, landslides, because a section of forest has been removed and there's no longer a root structure to hold the dirt on the mountain. You've destroyed habitat of animals. But we are trying, through Trini Eco Warriors, to raise the awareness by bringing these items to the public's attention using video. We find that people are very visual, and by showing them, they can't ignore it.
When I was doing some reading for our discussion today, I came across some information about the extent of forests, or should I say the deforestation that's taken place in Trinidad and Tobago. And right now we have about 44% of our country is forested. Between 1990 and 2010, we lost an average of 0.31% of our forest per year. So in total, we lost some 6.2% of our forest cover within a 20-year period. Are we seeing a slowdown of that degradation? And would that degradation have been worsened if we hadn't embarked on some reforestation programs? Mr. Singh?
We are seeing a bit of a slowdown in the level of loss. There is still the notion that we are fairly well endowed with forests, and therefore it was easy to think that the forest was ripe for conversion to other types of use, agriculture. But then the forest unforested lands had to give way for other uses in the name of development. We all know what is happening with quarrying in the northeast of this country. A lot of those lands are forest reserve lands. So on paper, they are still there as forest reserves, but they are assigned to another use. What we should be looking at and aiming to do is to, once those lands have been exhausted of the minerals, the quarry aggregates, we should be looking at some sort of rehabilitation and restoration of those lands, so that all is not lost on that front. Yes, and certainly the reforestation that has had to take place in several parts of the country, Trinidad especially, would have helped slow down the overall loss of forests. We do have problems with fires. Yes, unfortunately, our fires do not completely destroy our forests. Where there is a whole lot of damage in very severe dry seasons, such as we experienced the year before in 2010, we do go in and do some restoration, reforestation work.
Mm-hmm. Could we throw the spotlight on Tobago for a little bit? Because I remember reading somewhere once that Tobago was the very first, the central range in Tobago.
The main ridge?
The main ridge, yeah. That was like the first first forested area protected by a government, by the state. Yes, yes. Has that been compromised, though, over the years?
Well, it's difficult for me to, from the Forestry Division here in Trinidad, to speak for the Tobago and what is happening there. But you're right in that the Main Ridge Forest Reserve was the very first reserve set aside by statute in the Western Hemisphere, so far as the records show. My guess, and it's just an assessment from a remote vantage point, is that no, it's pretty much still intact, but I would have to defer on that to the people who are based in Tobago, because Forestry Division does not have oversight over Tobago forest management.
This question of sustainability is a pretty taxing one because we have limited land space on the island that we want to do so many different things with, including, grow food, put up housing, put up industry to generate economic activity, and so on and so forth. How do we really find that healthy mix, though? Some things would have to be sacrificed, yes, but how do we really come to that healthy mix? Who should really get, the first bite at the cherry, so to speak, when we're having a discussion about how we use our resources in Trinidad and Tobago? Far too often, we see that those who are speaking for the environment, and particularly for forests, are shouted out of the room. They're not even allowed in the room to have that development discussion. How can we change that and make a difference, given that we're putting forests in the spotlight this year for World Environment Day?
I'm totally uncomfortable with the debate even being framed in those terms, as if it's an either-or proposition. Either we have development or we have environment. That is a common belief. It is false. It's false all over the world. That choice does not need to be made. There is a potential for balance. If you look at groups like Conservation International, Rocky Mountain Institute, Friends of the Earth, these are people who could be labeled as environmental lobbies and an environmental group, but they're particularly finding the common ground between development and the triple bottom line, social, culture, well, actually quadruple bottom line, social, cultural, economic, and environmental benefit. So there is a fallacy that is perpetrated all over the world, in my opinion, and it's often used as a political tool. You either are for development or you're for environment. This has no basis in fact, especially, and I think one of the nicest things about this theme of forests, nature at your service, is that they're getting out into the public what Mr. Singh was already referring to, which is the idea of ecosystem services. See, there's historically been a little bit of accounting flim-flam perpetrated on us all, which is that industries take assets and book them as income. Depletable assets like gravel or oil or clean water that they might be damaging or removing from the national equation, but they don't book it as an expense. We all get to pay it, though. There is an economic cost to bad management. So I'm glad, and scientists and environmental lobbyists are very hip on this idea now of ecosystem services and putting a value to it. You know, how much is a lion walking in a park in Kenya worth? How much is a sea turtle worth? How much is a reef in Tobago worth? And they actually deliver enormous economic value into our national economy. Once you stop playing games with the accounting principles, you realize that the economics of development must incorporate the economics of all the natural resources that are part of that development.